This was meant to be Finding Heather. End of story. It turned out, tragically, that it was only the beginning.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Room Went Dark, the true crime in film, where we discuss films, TV, and documentaries, all based on real events. I'm your host, Lorraine, and I'm joined by my co host, Amalie. Hello, Amalie.
Hello,
With
Lorraine.
her cup of tea that she just asked me, am I allowed to drink my cup of tea? No.
Well, I'm just checking because I might just
What would
see
you
if
have done
it's
if I'd
still
said
ever
no?
in a. Well, I just would drink it. I've got like a cup warmer, which is like the best gift anyone could ever
Oh,
give me. So a friend of mine got us two,
yeah,
one each for me and Steve. Steve's broke his cup.
of course he has.
Classic, and steals mine regularly.
Yeah.
But so we've put the warmer up in the office. So
Oh,
whenever we're up, whoever cleans
it's
the
up
office
there.
for the day
Gets the.
has got the mug, and they can place it on the warmer, and it keeps your tea and coffee nice and hot.
Okay, well, I haven't said no because that would be weird. So I'm allowing her to drink her tea while we talk about something very horrific, which is the Fred and Rose West story that's on Netflix, a British horror story, which
Right.
is obviously about the murders, the torture, the rapes of at least 12 young women and girls between 1967 and 1987, between Fred and
Mhm.
Rose West. And they recently discovered some recordings, and a lot of it was the first person account as told by Fred and Rose, and they've kind of put all this together to give us a bit of more insight as to what went on when they were captured. And I think, this is a UK thing, and I remember when it happened, when it kind of hit the papers and stuff. And yeah, it's one of those
Yeah.
things where obviously every murder is, they're all bad. But this was one where I think because of how it was done, and his kids were also dragged into it when they were very young, and how it seemed they seemed like just the normal everyday couple, and it was in a time which you wouldn't get now, where if you saw a woman in a car or a
Mm.
woman was there, you'd think you were safe. Whereas
Mhm.
now we wouldn't think like that. But back then it was like the woman's there, you're fine. So, and obviously it was the house was next to other houses, so it was in full view of everyone, but everything was so
Yeah.
private. So I think the whole thing is just, it's the definition of you just don't know what goes on behind closed doors.
Well, and at that time as well, which was like what, like early 90s. um I think you sort of think by that point the police have got enough
Mm,
technology to be able to kind of find people that do these kind of things, in terms of
yeah,
like serial killings and things like that, that it had declined like a lot from, say, sort of like the 70s and 80s before they had that kind of technology. So
yeah.
I think it was really shocking for the community around them. And we've got to say it's not really that far from where I grew up. So like
Well, yeah, like I was
yeah.
there like a few years ago with a person I used to be friends with, and we were walking down the street, and she just stopped dead, and she said she lived in Gloucester. She doesn't now, but she lived at the time. She goes, "Look where we're standing," and I was like, "Where?" Because I wasn't paying any attention. She goes, "That's where the house was," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Ooh," you know, it's it. It's very close to home. Like, do you know what I mean? I think when
Yeah.
it's, England's so small anyway,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But where did you grow up? Bristol.
Well, in Bristol, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not.
And
It's not.
I did visit Gloucester regularly, and I had a friend who lived there briefly for a little bit, so I kind of know it. Well, I sort of did know it quite well. I probably have been to many places since then that I probably couldn't really remember
Oh yeah,
geographically
yeah.
that much now if I went there. But um, yeah, and I was very, very young when I guess when it happened. I would have been a child at that point, but it was I definitely remember it. I remember. it's sort of still being talked about even throughout my childhood and things like that. Like it was just, yeah. But rewatching it was actually really hard because um I think, but to start with, because there were children involved, obviously
Yeah.
one of their children, it was kind of actually the catalyst is where it all started. I mean, I'll
Mm.
let you kind of do
Yeah,
the
go
scoop
on.
on it if you want, but I guess it was the daughter, wasn't it, that the kids had like made like a comment, I think, to I think possibly school, like teachers
Mm.
or something, about like, oh, if we get
Go into the patio or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, if we get in trouble, we'll be put under the patio.
Yeah.
But then there'd been like the one of their like eldest daughter that had been like missing for ages, but no one had even remotely checked up on it. It was really bizarre.
But yeah, I think it is one of those cases where, and unfortunately, we do have quite a lot of them within the UK. And you hear of stories where, like, there was an incident with someone my husband knew where they took their child hurt their foot. They took them to the doctors and was like, or the hospital, oh, they've hurt their foot. He was made leave the house for 3 months while they did an investigation. And
Mm,
it turned out she had hurt her foot doing whatever she did. I can't remember what it was. And then you have stories like this or like baby pee and all that kind of stuff where there's like so much evidence of bad things happening or kids just not being there when they should be at school. Like whatever about now we've got all this technology. Back then you still had roll call. Like, do you
mm,
know what I mean? You still had your
yeah.
name called out. And it's kind of like there's some situations I'm like, what do kids have to say or do, or what you've witnessed to make you go, and there's certain things I'm like, you can't use understaffed. Like if you're going back to a house a lot or your kids are saying this or someone's not showing up to school, especially back then. I know now we do get a lot of antisocial behavior and stuff like that. And, but like you said, if like, where did no one think, oh, where is she?
Yeah, like where she's just
you know,
disappears overnight and is just never kind of seen even locally, sort of in the street or like leaving the house
yeah,
or it's just yeah, the idea that someone or like even I think it's the idea that a child actually could
could just
just
disappear
disappear and no
and
one
nobody.
cares and no
Yeah,
one
because you keep
notices.
exactly because you keep hearing like if an adult disappears, well, they're an adult, they can go off as much as they want. But with kids, and I suppose as well, there was a time because obviously listening to a lot of true crime when it's kids, there was a certain time where they'd be like, oh, they're a runaway. And no matter what the parents said, no, and that's what they'd be put down as. So, there's probably lots of elements to it, or just simply fell through the cracks, which again is really sad.
Mm,
But kind of starting off with Fred and Rose, it's all like when you think about how, the fact that she was a lot younger than him when they got
yeah,
together and how she had come from a very abusive home, he had come from an abusive home.
yeah.
Like they weren't, they shouldn't have been together in the first place for those reasons alone. Nothing, take all the other stuff out of it for now. Like they should not have been together.
Seems like a bad cocktail, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, yeah. And that there was like nobody kind of looking out for them when they were children. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously not everyone goes on to, do what they did, but they did get together. And, she was kind of just thrown into this, you're going to look after my kid because I'm going to prison. And then that's what, she had Charmaine, which she couldn't handle. And, that's kind of what really, Charmaine was the one that kind of got her, well, it couldn't have
Mm.
been Fred,
Because
because he
Fred
was
was
in
away.
prison at the
Yeah.
time. So, um, and it just kind of from there when he gets out and like it's just one of those things like we say, how do you get to do those things together and have those conversations like how far you're willing to go? Because these guys went far. It wasn't,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't Charmaine was killed and then oh shit, like what we gonna do? It was like, well, let's carry on. We've started now, so
Yeah. Well, because and I think that's the thing is that the documentary left out a lot of the really kind of dark stuff.
mm.
There was a lot. I mean, we won't go into it, but people can look
Yeah,
at
no, I've read
like
a book by the daughter, and I
yeah.
think from yeah, I can't remember which daughter it was, and I just remember which yeah, I'm not going to go into. If you want to know, go read the book. But it was no, nobody should do that to anybody, especially to your child.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And you just think like, the interesting bit for me, because Rose was really young when her and Fred met,
Yeah.
it sort of felt, and I don't know if this is true, but it sort of
Mm.
felt like that there was sort of like an element of grooming in the beginning.
Hmm.
I mean, she wasn't innocent herself. She came from an abusive background, and there was already that kind of premeditated possibility
Yeah.
for something anyway, maybe, not necessarily, but because not everyone goes on to,
No.
do those things, and even if they've had a crap childhood, but it's sort of like by the end of, not the end of their, well, I guess by the end of their relationship, because Fred did end up taking his own life in prison, but it kind of like switched round where she was actually kind of the mastermind behind it all and was
Oh,
claiming this complete innocence still about not knowing anything. And I'm sure that they'd both had conversations about, if we ever get found out, I'll take the rap, you've got
well,
to,
that was clear in the
yeah,
recordings when we first heard the recordings. He was like nothing to do with it, and she was going along with that very. Yeah, and it's kind of like it's easy to with Fred. It's easy with Fred because Fred says it all. We know we can hate him. We can hate you, Fred. You've admitted to all this stuff, and it's very
accept it
simple
all
to
so
go there.
much.
But with her, like obviously we know the truth now, right? And we know the truth then. And back then, I don't recall. I don't think I believed a word she said. To be honest with you, even back then. But I was
Mm,
older than you, and obviously at your age back then, you wouldn't have been listening to it as detailed, I'm sure. But
no,
there would have been a time because it still does happen where people would have she would have placed doubt in people's minds.
sure.
And I think that with her, she felt like so much more disgusting because of how she tried to manipulate people and get them to think she was this poor, hard done by. She was the one that sat in the cars, and that's what encouraged the women to get in because there's another woman in there and all that kind of stuff. Because you hear that, well, there was a woman in there, so what danger would I be in, and this type of thing. And even to this day, like she won't say she did anything. And I know the thing with him, he did it for her. He didn't, own up to this stuff because he's like, I want to make this right for the people. No, he did this all because he thought he was getting her out of trouble. But I just thought she was absolutely despicable because of how she acted,
Mm,
and the fact she was going to let him take the fall for all this.
yeah,
Like
without
showed she
taking
didn't
any
even care about
responsibility.
him because when she found out he died, I watched something recently actually. A thing popped up, and I think it was in the documentary as well. When she found out he died, all right, it's like, thanks for letting me know. After all that time, even if you were happy for him to take the blame, not even a
Yeah.
slight bit of tears or sadness or,
Well, that was
you
like
know,
the when they had the court proceeding, wasn't
yeah,
it? And
she wouldn't
and
look at him.
he and she just refused to even acknowledge that his existence. It was like really cold. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like, because I wondered, or perhaps maybe her solicitors or sort of said like, just don't interact with him
No,
whatsoever.
it was
It could
her.
damage your case. But yeah,
No,
I
I,
just
it was all, to me, that was all her. Like, he obviously had a learning disability, he had the appropriate adult, and you could tell when he spoke, he wasn't, the sharpest tool in the box. Obviously, he did all this crap, but like, um, whereas she she was a bit more, I think. I still think she wasn't, the smartest person either, but the
sure.
fact that she could do that, it takes a lot to be that ballsy and manipulative and all that kind of stuff. Like, so she knew 100% what she was doing. And I just think she's like in prison, they call her auntie or so. They treat her like this little old freaking lady that's in there knitting sweaters and
Oh,
stuff.
see, I heard that they like no one talks to her. Like
Oh no, I
she's
had the other
become
thing.
like this really big, like she's essentially like gained like a lot of weight and is a
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
very, very
Yeah.
big woman that essentially just sits in a cell, like probably like you're saying,
Yeah.
like knits and like but like people just don't talk to her because they know
So they
because she
ignore
because
her.
she changed her name by default whilst in
Mm.
prison. But
Oh,
everyone
okay.
obviously knows who she
Rose
is.
Rose West,
And
yeah.
they just ignore her. They just don't speak to her. They don't.
Well, that
Like
just goes to
Roger.
show you can't believe everything you bloody see. Because yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean
see.
that also might be untrue. Like,
No, 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 no. I'd like to believe your version, to be honest with you.
I mean,
Um,
that's preferable to everyone treating her like a little old lady who, you think she's
yeah.
adorable because that terror
And
is
I get in
terrifying.
prison, you kind of, people just do what they can and stuff to kind of get by. But
Yeah.
um, people that's the thing, isn't it, though, is like he's gone now, and it's that thing where he didn't really have to deal with the punishment of it all. Like he died a broken man and a broken hearted man, you could say, because he did that
Yeah.
because she saw. But that again, that was his only interest, was her. He didn't care about the girls. He didn't care about his children. He only cared about the fact that Rose wouldn't look at him.
Mm.
And, so he would have went that would have been his thing. But it was a coward's way out because he didn't want to deal with his, I'm not saying suicide is coward's thing, but I mean doing it for his reasons. Face the music, man,
Mm.
deal with
Yeah.
your punishment. But then you've got her who is getting the punishment, but is like the hard done by. Poor
Still
me.
claims
I
she's
never did a
innocent.
thing. I didn't even know what was going on. What?
How could you not like your
Oh,
husband's like digging up the
you
back
knew.
down patio.
You
Like,
knew.
of course you
You
know
had
what's going
plenty
on.
of time. You had plenty of time. And
Yeah.
yeah. And then because of
I
this,
wonder if it was always the case that perhaps maybe because they were sort of I say swingers, but they
yeah.
would pick up. I gotta wonder whether it actually no, I in my head I want to believe that it sort of just became this escalation thing where they were picking up women and then things got more and more depraved with these women that they were doing things and then killing them because if they let them go, then they would get in trouble. Like, but then you've got these kids that have been, just taken out overnight and
Mm.
they're gone and they're dead and they're buried under the patio and like it's just like what? It makes you wonder like just how many people there actually are because I
Well,
don't
weird
think we'll ever
because
really know the full number.
no, because some
We'll
of
see.
them were buried in different places. So, like at the start, remember Anne McFall, she was pregnant with his kid, and then Catherine
Yeah.
Costello, she was married to him and buried. This is in Kempley. So, they were only 1826, one of them pregnant, and so he had done that. So, if he had done those two things, like what else? What else have they done? There's another one here. Linda Goff, murdered and buried at Midland Road, and then the rest of them in the cellar, in the garden. Um, and so, this was going long on. I think it comes down to this. This is how they got their jollies.
I
This is
think
what they
so.
enjoyed doing because,
I
you
think so.
know, he would let his, one of the things was his wife would have other men and he'd sit and watch, I think through
Mm,
a peephole or something. And then these girls would be brought back, and one girl spoke on the thing about how she had been brought down there, and stuff done, and she made it very clear that Rose wasn't up there baking cookies, not having a clue what was going on, like, do you know what I mean? um
uh,
but yeah, and it was a time because obviously back then people would go, I'm moving to such and such, I've got this great job, I'm going to be a nanny or something, and off you go. You just didn't,
mm,
like, I did it when I was living in Ireland and I moved to Sligo and I moved into this hotel with these people that owned it.
wow.
And she was batshit fucking crazy because she was so horrible to her children, to me, to her
Oh my
husband, to
God.
anyone that come in things. She was evil as hell. And but I was in this hotel in their quarters. This was in 91. Do you know what I mean? And no one would have
Yeah.
thought much of it, you know? And but that was it. You just went, oh, I got a job as a this, I got a job as that, and off you went.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just terrible. And the sad thing was, a lot of these girls thought, oh, I'm gonna get a job, and it's live in, so I don't have to worry about rent. And I got, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, same with like the lodgers as well,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
sort of like
yeah.
and like I can't I've
Because it was
forgotten
such a
her
big
name
house, so
now.
you would have these rooms, like because it was one of those tall house that
Yeah, it
was
was like a
in,
really tall terrace.
yeah,
I think it
and
was like a semi-detached terrace, wasn't it? It looked like it was kind of end of a row,
yeah, the way it
slopey
was
or
joined to, yeah, semi-detached. Yeah, it was semi-detached. Um, because where it is now, it's just a walkway. You just
right,
walk
yeah.
through it. It's a
Yeah.
like a little lane or something. But it's yeah, it is one of those times where it was completely normal what they did. And to hitch, I hitchhiked on my own back in the 80s and 90s. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, and I could have been someone you were talking about. It's
Oh,
just
God. I hate to think the things that you've done where
no,
you
but like this
potentially
was a
put yourself in
time,
danger.
but this was a time in Ireland when, all those girls went missing.
Mm,
I was in a different part of the country than when it happened, but Ireland's not exactly a big place.
even so,
But
yeah.
yeah, when I think back to some of the stuff I did the same things these girls did.
Well, this is it, and I've had conversations with friends about this, that I do have like one or two friends, and I don't know whether it's growing up with brothers.
Hmm.
I tend to find like the friends that have grown up with just brothers tend to be a little bit more brave about going out hiking by themselves or like just generally doing things and not and feeling quite safe about it, maybe. I mean, it
Yeah,
obviously
I've only
depends
got a
on.
brother, an
Yeah,
older
but that's
brother.
what I mean. And whereas like the friends that have got sisters or the particularly like younger sisters, and maybe
Mm,
they've had to be in a position
mm,
of like responsibility as like the eldest sister or something, they're just like absolutely no, I would never
yeah.
like that is just how it's worked out around me, I guess. But yeah, I mean, there were times I look back at my teenage years, like late teens, early 20s, and I think I probably put myself in a lot of danger at points, sort of where,
Mm.
and not really thinking about it and just trusting the people around me,
Yeah,
you know.
it's more like I find with it because when I do think back to it, like obviously I'm of a generation where we were alone a lot without adults.
Mm,
So that's what you did. You just went off and, I was 17 when I left home,
yeah,
um, and
yeah.
you just go off and nobody's checking in on you, because you didn't have phones and all that kind of stuff. And I was only in Sligo, which wasn't far, but
Mm,
it was far enough still at the same time. Um, and I think that's the thing. These girls were of an age where you just, I know there was a couple that had a little bit of, trouble at home, not anything serious, but like, a bit of bickering with fat parents and stuff, which,
yeah.
that I was that situation as well. Um,
Well, some of them were, I mean, I wouldn't say that they were vulnerable young women, but they were, they were out there in the world by themselves at a young age. And like you said, some of them had, some issues with family, parents and things like that. But
I think you're vulnerable in the sense like not because when we think of someone vulnerable now, we kind of think of them, they might have some mental health issues or there's something going on to make them vulnerable. Whereas I think back then, you're just vulnerable because you're a young girl, woman on your
yeah,
own, out and about, and you're so ready to leave home. You're so ready to have your own money and start your own life and I found a room or I found a job or I've met this lovely couple and you think they're sat in the car, oh, we've got this, we've got that, oh, this is great, I've hit the jackpot, like, because as well you got to remember back then that's how you got work, that's how you got
mm,
accommodation. You used to just there'd be a sign on someone's house, rooms to rent or jobs available, and you just walk in, either
yeah,
ask, you didn't even need a
yeah.
CV sometimes, oh, I can do that, all right then, come on, can you start today? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you
You
didn't
know,
need any kind of tenancy agreement or anything like
no,
that. You could
no,
just
it was
pay
just
cash in
all
hand to someone to
exactly,
rent a
exactly.
room in the
Whereas
house. Yeah.
now you would have a trail. If you went to
Yeah.
apply for a job today, you'd have a trail of everyone you've gone. And, everyone would know that because you would tell a couple of mates, today I'm off to see Bob because he's got a job for me and we're going to chat. And I'm
Yeah.
meeting him in this place and I'm going to be, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there would
And
be that big,
yeah, I guess equally, if someone moves into your house, you have to declare them on the like council
yeah,
tax, and
yeah.
there's just so many. It's so different now compared to
Well, they're more worried about as well what you're going to be like. Whereas back
yeah,
here, it's just like, we got a
that's true.
room. Oh,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
girl. She'd be grand.
yeah,
Whereas I think now you'd be like, if you were taking in a tenant,
yeah,
you would want, what blood type they were. Like, do you know what I mean? Just because you would
yeah.
want that much information.
What blood type they were. But yeah, yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think there's sort of like I don't know. So it feels that quite often there's always like this front f for a lot of these serial killers where it's sort of like, oh, but they're lovely and they're, they lodged, young vulnerable women that didn't have a place to go. And
Aren't
like,
they lovely?
yeah, aren't they wonderful? And then in the meantime, there's like people buried under the patio, and you're just like, whoa, okay. I
But I
just,
think,
yeah, I don't know. It did get me watching this. I did get quite upset about it. And I don't know whether because it is so close to home, because I don't usually get that. I can feel quite sort of detached from a lot of it when I'm watching, not detached, that's not right, but like I think because it's UK based and it's very, very near to where I grew up, that it just feels too close to home a little bit, if that makes sense.
yeah, and I think like with some serial killers as well, it's, you know, you could probably see yourself in some of these girls. You've
100%.
been young,
I was
you've
that.
been excited to leave home, you've been
Yeah,
excited
yeah,
to go on your first holiday or the first time you got on the bus on your own or whatever.
yeah,
So, I think that's the thing. You can see yourself in these girls. And you know
yes,
it,
yeah.
for some of them it was just wrong place, wrong time. They were
Mhm.
the person that was hitchhiking at that particular time that got into that car. They were the person that happened to show up when that room was now available to rent,
Mm,
you know now behind them, 2 seconds later another girl could have walked up, but she's just missed them. Like, do you know what I
mm.
mean? And she will never know that she's just missed them.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
the thing. I think when you see stuff like this compared to other things, because obviously there's certain things we can't, like when sex workers get taken, it's easy to kind of separate yourself from that because that's not what you are. If a gay man's murdered, you're not a gay. You know what I mean? You can be sympathetic and know it's disgusting, but it's harder to relate to because you're not that person.
that's
Whereas
true.
I
I
think
agree.
when you see these, or when
Yeah,
it's children, especially when it's children, because or
yeah.
vulnerable people, if someone was like special needs or something, you'd feel it more because I mean, it's weird because killing anyone's unfair, but there's just that little added extra when someone's a really really vulnerable person. That's like, come on, you
It
know.
is strange that, isn't it? There's sort
Yeah.
of like where you sort of something about, cruelty towards vulnerable
Mm.
people, whether it's children or the elderly. Like if you ever see something about someone
Yeah.
treating like an elderly person horrifically, people will just go off on it because they're
Yeah.
just, you are
But the same
disgusting.
thing could happen to you and they wouldn't. The
No,
exact
exactly. Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing could
It's
happen to you and
interesting,
it
isn't it?
wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's this
Fascinating.
it's this thing where we can, but that's the thing I suppose about being human is we relate to certain things, but
Mm.
where some people might not relate to this, you know, because they just, they may be, and it's not saying that means they don't care,
Yeah.
but it's harder for probably a 17-year-old, who was a 17-year-old lad at this time because that wasn't happening to, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I just like for me it's the kid like their kids. Like I
mm,
just cannot even believe like one having to go through that childhood, but then to just to live with that for the rest of their lives.
yeah,
People are going to find out that their parents at some point. Like
well,
how would you decide whether to or not to disclose it to which other people that do you know what I mean? You'd have to be
yeah.
really. I'm sure they can probably count people on one hand that they've disclosed it to.
Well, there is, her name's Anna Marie West. That's the book I read. I thought it
Mm.
was Anne, but it's Anna
It's
Marie.
Anna Marie that ran away, didn't she?
Yeah, and she was the one that wrote a book and it was where I read something. I think it was when she was 8 it happened to.
Yeah.
But she looked so much like her mum.
Right,
Like,
okay.
do you know what I mean? And that's the thing.
That's
And
odd.
the boy, Stephen, I think his name is, he
Mm.
does look like the dad. And I think they've been very public. Like they have spoken out loud and all this kind of stuff. So people know who they are.
Yeah.
And I think it's the thing where we said, we were talking about how, so for instance, I watched a documentary on BTK's daughter. She did it. And when
I
he
haven't
was
seen
doing
that
his
yet.
crimes, she was a child. And
Yeah.
whether she was a child or not is irrelevant. She didn't do any of those things. But the sympathy you get as a child, because your dad's a serial killer, and the sympathy you get as an adult.
Very
So it's like, you
different.
turned 18, right? Now we're going to get, and that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So there will be people that will say, that will give these guys grief because they need someone to blame,
Oh,
and they're not,
100%.
Fred and Rose West aren't there to blame, and BTK isn't
Yeah,
there to blame. So do you know what? You're
absolutely.
the next best thing. I'm going to blame you for something you had no idea of, had nothing to do with. And to be fair
Yeah.
to Fred and Rose's kids, I know, because like she didn't have a clue what was going on, his BTK's daughter, but these kids knew stuff was going on. But what were they supposed to do? How were they supposed to? Now, they did start talking about it, and that's what, kind of brought all this stuff to light. So they did do something. But
Yeah.
when they're 4, when they're 5, when they're 6, and when it's being done to them, and they're being told you're going to end up under the patio.
But also, when you're that young, you don't know any different.
No.
I think you just think, well, this is what every family's like, and it's
Yeah.
not until you sort of probably get to like early teens,
Mm,
maybe a little bit before that, where you start sort of seeing other family members, but not other family members, like friends'
yeah.
families. But that really is only if you go over to their house for
Mm.
dinner or something after school, when you're like, oh, this is very different to to my
No,
family. They will eat at a
I,
table here and that kind of
well,
thing.
no, I agree. I agree.
But yeah, I just I quite sort of I felt like the documentary did a really good job of just following again. I quite like these documentaries where they follow the investigation,
Yeah.
and it's more about the investigation and how they sort of tried to coax them round to getting confessions, and I quite like that sort of that kind of interests me. I find it quite sort of fascinating, and maybe more so it's just sort of a maybe it sort of eases you into the story or the I guess the reality of it all without it being too intense. Not that that would bother me. They could go into deep dark detail and it, wouldn't. I'd still be able to sort of watch it because I'm weird. But but I think it just sort of, yeah, it did give a really good sort of just an understanding of how they were trying to bring round that, particularly that
Mm,
confession from Rose. They'd
yeah.
bugged the house, but she must have known that
Oh,
the house was
she
bugged.
wasn't saying it to anybody.
She was still adamant. She was
Oh my
making
God.
sure that she was. And the thing is, actually, is that for a lot of human beings that get caught when doing things, they do lie. It's a really natural thing
Mm.
to happen. And I was
Oh yeah.
talking to my father-in-law about this because he was high up in the police for a long time, and he was saying it is the go-to reaction. People will automatically just lie because they don't want to get caught and they don't want
Yeah.
to get punished and they don't want to be seen as being a bad person, even if they have done something horrific. It's like their mind can't adjust to the fact that the shame stops them from admitting it. Whereas, like with Fred, he was just so like I couldn't.
Oh, he
I
wouldn't
think
shut
it
up.
really got to me how
Yeah.
matter of factly he could
Oh yeah.
just be like, "Oh yeah, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then and then I put her under the patio, and you're like, okay, Fred, if we take you back, are you going to be able to show us
Yeah.
where you put her?
Over
Yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah,
We're just
over
there.
there, yeah.
Yeah.
Just
No, no.
like,
I agree. I liked with it because the way some documentaries, they kind of like, we're going to show you some stuff and we're going to make you think it's this, but maybe
yeah,
it wasn't this. And whereas this, it is what it is. Here's the story. We've got some information that these recordings, stuff like that, and we're just going to show you what it is. We're not going to try and make you doubt it, or oh, I wonder this, that, and the other. There was none
yeah,
of that, because that annoys me.
yeah, me too. I
That
hope they
kind of
do.
stuff, when they really do um try and make you second guess stuff, which I think, though, let's be honest, with some serial killers, you just can't do that, you
Oh
know.
God, no, no,
It would
no.
just,
Yeah.
but I would be curious, because there are some people that don't know this story. And
Oh, there be, yeah, we
I
not.
would personally like to sit someone down who's never heard of this story, knows nothing about it, and make them watch it and see, do they think Rose is guilty?
Mm. Yeah,
Because
because I imagine a lot of
yeah,
people probably would be wondering if she was actually coming away
yeah,
from it.
because she puts doubt.
Yeah,
She puts
unless
doubt.
you were around at the time and you kind of knew the
Oh yeah,
ins and
no, I
outs of
mean, like,
it.
for me, there was a certain way sometimes that people spoke when I was younger, when they were like, when they were wronged, but they felt like they hadn't, I hadn't done it, but they had, and they spoke in a certain tone and a
Yeah.
certain way. And she reminded me of so many people in
It's
the
that
way
kind of
she
sort
was
of,
like, well, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
yeah.
I'm not taking the hit for this,
Okay.
and stuff like that. And she just reminded me so much of gobby people who were just who tried too hard to convince
Mm,
you that it wasn't them. Do you know that way?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I've met loads. I mean, I'm not talking these people haven't done that type of thing, but it could have been over anything. I didn't, when someone goes, I didn't say that. I didn't
yeah.
say that. It was that
Bloody
type
well
of,
did.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
that type of tone. So when
yeah,
she
yeah.
was talking and you would see certain things and you just look at her, like I remember even looking at her and I would think to myself, I just thought she was vile. And I know the press has a way, they did it with Chris Jeffries when it came to the whole Joanna Yates thing, where they plastered him all over the papers to look like this villain, which he
Yeah.
wasn't.
Mm.
And I did have doubt
I thought
when it
it
first
was
happened. And
awful
I
to
was
say, to
working
admit.
it.
I
I
thought it
was
was
working
him.
for the media at the time. I was in the
Yeah.
offices and you know, so I would be curious to see who someone who didn't know the story
Mm.
was there, doubt. And do you know what? It's one of these things. They can't all be lying. So the people that luckily survived and the kids that are still alive, what all of them got together and decided to make up all these stories about Rose. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
thing. They can't all be lying, you know?
yeah.
I don't think that any of them are lying. I think everything they're saying is true. I believe everything they're saying,
Mm.
you know? Um, but she, and he was, I mean, they were just both disgusting human beings with what they did. And him from like the point of view where, as you said, he might as well have been talking about, he'd been shopping and got some groceries,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
it was just so, yeah, just matter of fact, wasn't it? It was crazy.
But she wasn't. She had a lot more like there was a lot more behind when she spoke. Like
Oh,
she was
100%.
like
Yeah.
loud and up here and down there. Oh, there was anger and she laughed at times and all this kind of stuff. Whereas he was like, he was like a robot.
Mm.
There was
Oh,
just,
just, yeah, and just like, there was that moment, wasn't there, where they sort of said like about, what, like how did you deal with the body? And he was like, oh, I got a bread, bread knife. And I was like,
yeah,
you can't cut through bodies with a fucking bread knife. Like, come on. Like it was so strange. It was like to me, it just because he obviously had like the appropriate adult, and then there was obviously
yeah,
the villain and difficulty there. And it was so strange to me that there was this sort of learning difficulty kind of going on with him, and and it sort of seemed like he was kind of vulnerable a little bit. And
mm,
then he was also really he was capable of doing these
of all
things, these
this.
horrendous things, without any kind of like
Yeah.
breakdown or like just over and over. Like it's just I just yeah, it just
Yeah,
baffles
you
me
you have
that.
to wonder, don't you, how, and that's the thing with with serial killers, how they can talk about it because we don't understand it because we're not that way. We watch a commercial about a puppy and we're like, well enough
Oh
and stuff like
God,
that.
yeah.
But it's just how they can talk about doing these things to human beings that have, parents and siblings and friends and but just talking about them like they're just nothing.
Just
Yeah,
objects, yeah,
I cut her
yeah.
up under the thing. Yeah. And is there a point to this question? Like
Yeah,
it's
that kind
just
of level of detachment, like I think it has to come from having a ridiculous childhood. Like it has to, right? There can't be like how can you
but not all of them do. Like I
yeah, I
mean,
guess so.
I'm not like these two had a disgusting childhood. Like there was unbelievable bad behavior from parents and stuff.
Yeah.
But lots of people have that. Like, do you know what I mean? And they don't,
But you
like his daughters had that from them and they haven't gone on and done it. They're not off doing
yeah.
this. So, straight away, the children are proof that you can grow up being sexually abused and watch, know people being murdered and buried in your
But,
house. And
but for the majority of people
yeah, yeah,
grown up and been sexually
yeah.
abused, like they don't go on to, it's
No, they
just that
don't.
there is these odd ones that for whatever reason, and again, it's always like it's a cocktail of
Mm,
different stuff, isn't it?
yeah,
That comes together and maybe like a premeditated sort of like neurotype, that these things just happen, but it's yeah, to have just, but a bit like with the BTK, it's sort of like, you've got like your family, and then he goes out and he
he does
murders
this.
other people.
Yeah,
With this, it was so incestuous. There was just
yeah.
so much going on, you know,
And it was in the house.
intrafamilial kind of
Yeah,
like trauma and murder that was happening. It feels so incestuous actually when
yeah,
you sort of watch it and read about it, and you're just like, oh God, But again, that was their
yeah.
upbringing. Both of them, had
And
suffered in
it's
that way.
everywhere. Like it's in,
Yeah,
where do they get a break? Where do the kids get a bit of normality? Because if you're being
yeah.
abused in your own home,
Well,
you can't go
school.
up to your room and close the door, and
School's
then
the only place, isn't it?
yeah. But then there's this thing at school, there was a couple of kids acting up and I was like, and they went, you don't know what is going on with these kids behind closed door. And I was like, you don't know what's going on with any of these kids.
No, you
I says a
don't.
lot of kids could be coming to the school thinking, do you know what? I've got a few hours now where I'm not going to get walloped, I'm not going to get screamed at and all that kind of stuff. And then they're getting it from some other kids, but you don't know this. So you know what I mean? There's just this
It's the
weird,
quiet, compliant ones at school are the
yeah,
ones actually to
exactly.
be
There's this,
watching.
but yeah, it's the silent one. So, yeah. I mean, I think that overall, the whole thing is just, I'd like to say this is a rare thing, but we know it's not. And there's going to be more to come. And I think the fact that, in America is so much bigger and they've had so many serial killers, especially it was a big thing in the 60s, 70s, going into the 80s and stuff. But for
Yeah.
us, while we have had them, we don't, it's not been this big a story. Like it was just,
Well, and this was 90s,
yeah,
at
yeah,
that point
exactly.
things
Yeah,
had calmed down a bit because police did have the technology,
yeah,
to be
exactly.
able to catch people like this. But again, because this was sort of, inside the home, it
Mm,
wasn't random people and there wasn't like a pattern happening elsewhere. Um,
yeah,
it was about a particular family that I imagine probably for the locals they were just a bit like, oh, the West, they're a bit odd.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I think,
um,
was it this one? You might remember because I've watched quite a few documentaries and I can't remember, but I think it was this one. It was. There was a woman talking about the behavior of Rose or something. She goes, but you just keep to yourself. You don't, it's none of my business at
she
the end.
annoyed me. I'm gonna be
It was this,
honest.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
it was
like,
this. And I thought to myself, well, do you know what? Sometimes it's okay to not mind your business, and I'm not blaming her. It's not her
no,
fault,
I
obviously.
don't.
But
Yeah.
I
Um,
think if you have an inkling of something horrific going on, I don't mean just because you don't like them or saying maybe, you know, maybe you should say something, and I know
I mean,
it's a
I
real
think
tough
she
one.
genuinely just thought they were kind of into like
Yeah, I don't think she'd give a shit
BDSM
though. She's like, it's
stuff,
nothing to do with
right?
me.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
but again, I think for a lot of people, that yeah, they don't, they do because you do just turn a blind eye sometimes. Like
mm,
if you've got someone in front of you who seems like a very nice,
yeah,
friendly, helpful, kind person who's willing
yeah,
to drop you to the shop if you haven't got your car or go and get some shopping
yeah,
for you or do all these bits, but you know for a fact, like there's been whispers about them being into like dodgy sex stuff and
yeah,
you're like, well, I don't know, they've never mentioned it, but she actually, Rose had mentioned it to her and she had talked about it to her and said
yeah,
like, Fred like likes me to sex work with other men, and even then like that's not elite, that's not uh
no, I mean, if
illegal
it's
in the sense of like anything depraved, but
yeah,
and maybe she wasn't aware of anything else going on, but to be that close to someone and to they must have seen that the kids weren't
yeah,
there must, I mean, I don't know, maybe we didn't have that kind of like knowledge in the early 90s to be able to spot,
There was like a
neglected
kind of
children
like,
or
well, there was a weird thing where, um, kind of like I felt growing up in the 80s where there was a thing where you wanted to know everyone's business and you probably knew a lot of everyone's business, but you didn't talk about everyone's business because that's none of your business. Like
yeah,
this type of thing.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
because like we're battling this thing at the moment where when do you let your kids out on their own? And I keep trying to explain to
Mm,
them, I was like, when I went out, I would walk down the street, and even your generation to an extent, everybody knew me
everywhere.
the whole way
Yeah.
down. Every one of those people could see I was out, could say to my mum, "Oh, Lorraine was up to no good. She was whatever." Whereas now, I was like, the difference is nobody's paying attention to anything. I
No,
could
they don't know
understand if it
each
happened now
other.
because we don't know our neighbors. We don't go knocking on doors. We don't,
Yeah.
go in for coffee and stuff like that. Unless you know them. There's that kind of thing.
That is different here where I am because we're in a small semi-rural town. Like pe people
Yeah.
do know each other, and you actually have to be a bit careful. Like,
Well, everyone
you're
knows each
posting
other
stuff on the
here.
local Facebook site. You gotta be a
Yeah.
little bit
Well,
like
they know each other here, but they don't all know me because not been here long enough.
yeah.
But some of
What
them have been
yeah.
here since the 80, 81, 80. Like, do you know what I mean? So they all know each other, but they don't know me. Um,
Yeah, if
but
you're like
yeah,
new to the area or something like that,
yeah,
like I know my immediate neighbours, like I know their
yeah,
names and we've all
yeah,
met
yeah,
them,
yeah. I know
but
that.
I haven't had that in other
Mm.
places actually.
No,
In some
no,
places that I've lived, I've never known I don't even know who my next door neighbour is. Sometimes I've just
yeah,
never bumped into them or met them, which
yeah,
is bizarre. It's just different
yeah.
times of work, I guess, or something like that. But so yeah, it does feel different now, doesn't it? But it's
Funny enough, the last house I moved into,
yeah.
the woman that's there, she goes, "All right, Lorraine," and I was like, "How do you know me?" She goes, "We went to school together when we were 5."
Oh, you didn't even
I was like,
remember.
"What?"
You're like,
Yeah, so that was really weird. We went all through
oh,
primary school together. We were in the same class.
oh, that makes me so upset when that happens. You know, when you
Yeah,
sort of see
yeah,
someone, and they're like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And you're like,
yeah.
"Fuck, I
I know.
recognize your
It's
face,"
like
and I'm thinking,
Jesus
"Oh
Christ,
God,
yeah.
where do I know you from?"
But
Yeah,
to round it up, as we said, she is still in prison and
she
as
is.
innocent as ever in her mind. She's not
Yeah.
done anything wrong. Poor thing. You think they'd let her out
Um,
because she keeps saying she hasn't done it.
yeah, yeah. Funny how
Um,
she hasn't been let out. Yeah,
but he did kill himself on the 1st of January 1995. He was only 53.
yeah. But
Um,
just not long after he'd gone in, I think he'd not even been in a year, had he, before he'd
no, no,
taken his own
she's
life.
oh yeah, they weren't there long. She's
Mm.
72 now
Yeah.
and yeah, life in prison. So because in the UK a lot of the times life in prison doesn't mean life in prison, but obviously her and I think it was the same. I know Myra Hindley died, but there's certain people that don't get let out, and I think we need to do that more. Um, so we do because I think you get out a bit too easy sometimes here for murder. Um,
Mm.
whereas in America, that's one
Wow.
thing they do is they kind of, you've more chance of being kept in behind bars, because they do that whole life without parole thing. Whereas here, it's
Yeah,
not
it's
really
an
much of a thing.
interesting one here. I can't remember what I was watching recently though. There was something about I can't remember. So sometimes I both with the UK and with America, I feel quite confused and conflicted about some of the sentences that people get for certain
Yeah,
crimes, and you're just like, make that make sense because it doesn't to me. But I mean, I'm not. It's tricky, isn't it? In some senses, I don't necessarily believe in like the death penalty because I think, well, how does that make us any better than them? Like we're going
mm.
to punish them by murdering them because they've murdered someone. Like I don't know, it just seems a bit strange. But I think for a lot of people, it's like, well, give them the sentence that they've committed, essentially. You know, if they're going
Yeah.
to murder someone, then they should have their life taken.
I'm a
But
bit torn by it. I'm kind of like
not one for me.
I don't. It's weird. I don't believe in the death penalty in a sense because there's some people that have it's happened to them or they have been on death row, and it's turned out they were innocent. So for those people, you're glad it.
Sure.
Unfortunately, some of them it did go ahead for.
Yeah.
Secondly, if they don't if they don't have the death penalty, I would like prison to be hard. for the more, the crimes like this.
Yeah.
But thirdly, I've never had to truly think about it, because luckily I've never been in that situation. So I haven't had
Yeah.
to be one of the victims' family members
Yeah.
and heard, like recently, that young little girl that got kidnapped by that FedEx driver and he murdered her in America. Very
Oh, yeah.
recent.
Oh, God.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
had I been standing there, would I say, I'll do it. I'll shoot him myself. Like, do you know what I mean? Type thing. Because you hear that, give me 10 minutes with him. So, you kind of think with people like him, I'm like, look, you've no purpose in this earth. Just get rid of him. Like, do you know what I mean? Send him to some island, Epstein's island. And, do you know
Well,
what I mean?
but someone like that, you just think, well, that the rehabilitation it would take for,
Yeah.
do you know what I
And
mean?
the money, like it
Yeah,
costs to keep someone on death row is insane. And I'm like, that
yeah,
money could be
yeah.
spent somewhere else. But, I think you have to make sure you're 100% sure. I think if there's any doubt, and sometimes there obviously is, then no, I don't think they should get it if there's any doubt. Like even the tiniest little bit, definitely not the death penalty if there's any doubt. Because there have been cases where the person's been wrongly convicted.
Sure. Yeah.
And I listened to one recently, actually, and two boys got done. One of them said they did it. The other one was like, I didn't do it. We didn't do this, right? And they were in jail for ages. And one of them, the one that committed, that said they did,
Mm.
um, it turned out he'd been lying because the police basically made him say it. The other guy who said he didn't ended up getting hurt and ended up dying. And it came out, some guy admitted that he did it and knew all this inside stuff, and he was the one that did it. So
Gee.
the one guy ended up dying. The other guy finally got out of prison. And it was just this whole shit show.
That's
Um,
awful.
so yeah, so it's not as easy as saying I do or I don't.
Well, no, and we do
Yeah,
know as well that there are instances, particularly in certain areas, even in the UK, in terms of the police force, not
yeah,
to, you know, for the most part, I'm a strong believer that the police are there to support us and keep us safe. But there are certain
yeah,
counties that have forces that,
yeah.
yeah, don't necessarily follow the rules
No,
of engagement,
they
and
don't.
yeah, and
And
they
it's a
do.
shame because they ruin it for the ones that are trying to do good. So
Yeah, absolutely.
typical,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, that's us chatting about the documentary, um, and what we thought of it, and how much we hate Fred and Rose West with a passion. Um,
Well,
and yeah, let us know if you've watched it, what you think, or what you think of them. And you can email us at theroomwentdark@gmail.com, or you can go onto Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok as The Room Went Dark, and let
yeah.
us know your thoughts.
And if you've
And
got any ideas for documentaries that you've seen that you'd like us to
yeah,
cover,
or films
let us
and
know.
TV
Yeah, or
shows. We
films.
really need to do some of the TV shows, don't we? They just
Yeah.
take so long to watch. But next week we're going to be doing The Exorcist, which is
Yes.
based on some true stuff. Well, that depends on what you're believing, I suppose. But yeah. So we'll be going down a different route. But anyway, we
Cracking
will
fun.
chat to you soon. Bye.
Bye.